Tolentino ng MMDA na doon na kami mag-ambush interview dahil aalis siya ng bansa. So, kaya po kami napunta.
Hindi po ninyo sinasagot ang tanong ko sa inyo. Kayo ba'y nandoon sa airport, doon sa mga oras na binanggit ninyo, sapagkat voluntaryo kayo nagpunta roon o sumusunod kayo sa utos ng isang nakatataas sa inyo?
Sumusunod lang po sa utos ng reporter.
Ano po ang utos sa inyo na reporter? Pwede ho bang malaman ang kagalang-galang na hukumang ito?
Ang pagkakasabi niya sa akin, si Chairman Tolentino po ay pupunta ng airport. So, doon na po namin siya i-interviewin.
So,
kaya po kami nandun.
Sumagatid po, ang inyong mission ay para interviewin si kagalang-galang na Chairman Tolentino.
Opo, tama po.
Wala pong kinalaman nyo sa pag-alis ng kagalang-galang na GMA.
Opo, tama.
Meron kayong in-identify ditong video tungkol doon sa pag-alis ng kagalang-galang na GMA. Tama ho ba yun?
Opo.
Paano po nangyari ng inyong assignment para makuna ng video yung pag-alis ni Chairman Tolentino at napasama si kagalang-galang na GMA sa inyong video?
After po namin mag-interview sa airport kay Chairman Tolentino, nag-stay po kami doon sa airport dahil meron na hong ENG van na naka-standby doon. Ito po yung nagtatransmit ng mga materials namin. Since yung oras po wala na. Kumbaga, kakapusin na po kami ng oras para mag-back to base para sa materials na unang istorya namin. Ay nag-feed na po kami ng materials. Habang naghihintay po kami ng feeding ng materials, suddenly yung reporter ko na sinabihan ako, baka mag-stay tayo dito.
Ano po ang kinalaman ng pag-alis ng kagalang-galang na GMA doon sa inyong takdang pakikipagtakpo kay Chairman Tolentino? May kinalaman ho ba?
Wala po, Your Honor.
So hindi ninyo alam kung aalis nga o hindi ang kagalang-galang na GMA?
Wala po kami hindi.
Alright. Yung anong oras po yun na sabihin ninyong aalis?
Natatandaan ko po mga around 4 to 4:30 po. Sinabi ng reporter ko sa akin na
yun ang
may info daw po na aalis si GMA.
Kung walang sinabi sa inyo yung reporter ninyo, wala kayong maipahahayag sa kagalang-galang na hukumang ito tungkol sa pag-alis di umano ng kagalang-galang na GMA.
Opo, Your Honor.
Tama po yun?
Tama po.
Alright. Kilala ba niyo si kagalang-galang na GMA? O sa pangalan lang?
Sa pangalan po at sa mukha po. Siya.
Hindi ninyo siya nakausap kahit kailan?
Hindi po kahit kailan.
Nung araw na kinunan ninyo ng video, tama ho ba ang aking palagay na hindi ninyo nakadaupang palad o nakausap man lang kahit saglit ang kagalang-galang?
Hindi po, Your Honor.
Alright. Alam ba ninyo kung saan siya pupunta nun?
Wala po ako alam.
Ayan. Hindi rin ninyo alam kung bakit siya nasa airport nung oras na yon?
Wala rin po kaming idea.
Oo. Ang nalalaman lamang ninyo na pinagtapat ninyo sa kagalang-galang na hukuman ay yung di umano merong aalis ang kagalang-galang na GMA. Tama ho ba yun?
Opo, tama po.
Alright. Ano po ang kinalaman ng pag-alis ni GMA sa inyong pagiging assigned doon sa airport?
Since then, wala po kami idea na...
aksidente lang ang pagkakaroon ninyo.
Sabi kasi ng reporter ko na...
Hindi ko. Sige po, I'm sorry.
Sabi kasi ng reporter ko, mag-standby lang kami doon.
Yun lang po. Yun lang ang dahilan. Kaya nagkaroon kayo ng pagkakataon na makuna ng video ang alleged na pag-alis ni kagalang-galang na GMA.
Opo, Your Honor.
Alright. Alinsunod po sa inyong deklarasyon na aking natunghayan dito sa record, mga alas 9 na ng gabi noon, tama ho ba? Hindi pa naman po, mga 8:30 po to 9 ganun po. Kaya nga, alas 8:30 hanggang alas 9 ng gabi.
Opo.
Hindi ninyo alam kung bakit siya alis?
Wala po kung hindi.
Hindi ninyo alam kung anong dahilan ng kanyang pag-alis?
Hindi rin po.
That will be, maraming salamat po. That's all with the witness, Your Honor.
Any cross, any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor.
All right.
Thank you.
The witness is discharged.
Thank you.
Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, as manifested during yesterday's trial, the prosecution will no longer present evidence with respect to Articles 1, 8, 4, 5, and 6 of the verified complaint for impeachment but reserves its right to present evidence on the dollar accounts of Chief Justice Corona.
Only on Article 2.
Yes, may we now call on the prosecution? May we know the pleasure, Mr. President? Oh, yeah, before we do that, I'm sorry. I withdraw that request, Mr. President, and ask that Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago be recognized.
The gentle lady from Iloilo.
Mr. President, yesterday you were struck by a thunderbolt. All of a sudden, the prosecution stood up and said, we have 8 articles of impeachment, but we are no longer presenting or withdrawing at least 5 of those articles, leaving us with only 3 articles of impeachment. In my entire career as an RTC judge of Quezon City, I have never seen a lawyer in a civil case, which is in this instance parallel to an impeachment trial, withdraw any cause of action that he told the court he would present evidence on. That has never been done. An impeachment trial is like a civil trial and like a criminal trial. An RTC judge's jurisdiction over all kinds of trials, civil, criminal, and special proceedings. I have never heard, apart from my own individual experience, I've never heard of a civil case where there are several causes of action, where the lawyer suddenly says to the judge, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I've made a mistake. I now want to withdraw or drop more than half of my causes of action. This is unprecedented. That is why I feel obliged as Senator Judge to enter into the record my very serious concern about this development. Number 1, Counsel, you please take a seat. Number 1, early in this trial, I asked both counsel, both panels, to please tell the court how many witnesses you will present and how many pieces of evidence you expect to authenticate by the testimony of your respective witnesses. Both panels submitted their so-called compliance. That is to say, when a judge issues an order and you comply with the order, you file a piece of paper called compliance, and then you attach whatever it is that the court wanted to see or hear or to read. There's a compliance dated 27 January 2012, filed by the House of Representatives, where the order of the court was, list down all your testimonial and documentary evidence on my instigation. And I have this copy of the compliance by the House of Representatives. Number 1, Article 1, partiality to Mrs. Arroyo and Supreme Court decisions. Testimonial evidence, 6 witnesses. Documentary evidence as appropriate. This is a long list of documents that this witness, 6 witnesses, were supposed to authenticate. Article 4, irregularities in the issuance of the status quo ante order on the impeachment proceedings of former Ombudsman Mercedes Gutierrez. Testimonial evidence, said the prosecution panel, 7 witnesses, plus the corresponding list of documentary evidence to be presented through those 7 witnesses. Article 5, gerrymandering in the creation of 16 new cities and the declaration of Dinagat Island as a province. Testimonial evidence, 3 witnesses. I'm quoting the prosecution panel. Documentary evidence, a list of cases. Article 6, allegedly improper investigation of Associate Justice Mariano del Castillo's plagiarism case. Testimonial evidence, 2 witnesses. Documentary evidence as listed. Article 8, failure and refusal to account for the Judiciary Development Fund and special allowance for the judiciary. Testimonial evidence, 7 witnesses. All these witnesses are listed here. What their names are, what their addresses are, and what is the purpose of their proposed testimony. Plus, of course, the documentary evidence to be authenticated by these witnesses. So, House of Representatives January tells us in the impeachment court, we'll present these witnesses, we will also prove and authenticate, introduce into evidence and authenticate documentary evidence. Now all of a sudden, it's only March, January, February, March, all of a sudden, there's a complete turnaround. Ni hi, ni ho, wala. Basta sabihin lang niya, ayaw na namin na presenta ng ebidensya. Ngayon, this is of very serious concern to me as a lawyer and as a former judge. Una, naglalaro ba, nagbibiro ba kayo? In writing ang inyong compliance nga. Sabi niyo, we'll present so many witnesses, so many documentary pieces of evidence. Pagkatapos ngayon, sabihin niyo, without explanation, our case is very strong, we no longer want to present evidence on these causes of action. You are prejudging the case. What are you? Conducting trial by, what are you doing? Conducting trial by publicity? Let me remind you, an impeachment trial is both quasi-judicial and quasi-political. But let me place this in context. In its quasi-political aspect, an impeachment trial is not to be decided by the reading public or the viewing public or by any of the publics that we are addressing. It is true that the Constitution provides sovereignty resides in the people and all government authority emanates from them. But sovereignty resides in the people is a term of art in law, meaning to say it is a special code. It has a special meaning. It's not being used in its ordinary meaning. When the Constitution says sovereignty resides in the people, what people are we talking about? All 98 million Filipinos? Or all 65 million registered voters? A majority of registered voters? All survey firms? Or which survey firms are you referring to? Referenda? By certain NGOs? Referenda and surveys in certain campuses? No! This is not a direct democracy and we are not in Athens. The people are not going to decide this case. It is the Supreme Court and it is the High Court of Impeachment, this Senate, and the Senate alone that will decide this case. We are going to hold ourselves immaculate of all the propaganda that you are distributing abroad, meaning to say outside of this courtroom. Mapropagandaize kayo sa gusto ninyo. Walang epekto yan. Ngayon, hindi naman ito, as I said, hindi ito direct democracy. Representative democracy ito. We, the impeachment court, are the representatives of the people. We have been chosen by the Constitution to exercise the sovereign powers of the sovereign people in making a decision on the impeachment trial. Kaya galang naman ninyo kami. When I heard this news yesterday, I felt like creeping back into bed and adopting a fetal position, which is the normal reaction of any sane person when he is faced with a world that is crumbling around him. I no longer know what universe I am in, because I've spent 5 years of my miserable adult life in trial court day after day after day, hearing civil, criminal cases, and special proceedings. But I've never seen this done to a judge before. Ngayon, first point of concern was the compliance of the House of Representatives telling us that they were going to present such witnesses and such documents under these articles, but now they're being withdrawn or being dropped. At the outset, my request is prosecution files the written motion as directed by the Senate President. Will you please verify, are you withdrawing the articles or are you just waiving the right to present evidence on them? There's a difference. If you're withdrawing the articles, then you have to amend your complaint, because under the rules of court, you have to amend your complaint to conform to the presentation of evidence. Di pala kayo mag-ebidensya, ba't nyo lilistan yan? On the other hand, if you're completely just waiving the right to present evidence, then you give the defense the right to present evidence even if you have already waived your own right. Just because you waived your own right does not mean you can waive it for the other side. You've already, in effect, raised suspicions in the mind of a reasonable person about the moral position of the Chief Justice. Of course, they have a right to present evidence to dispel those suspicions raised by your own complaint. Kaya, pakiliwanag lang. Kayo ba ay sinasabi niyo sa amin, ayaw na namin itong articles of impeachment at baliwala na, pakibasura na. O, nandun yan pa rin yan sa aming complaint, pero ayaw namin magbigay ng ebidensya. Will you please make a distinction between those two? Because each of those optionals have their own peculiar circumstances in law. Ngayon, nagbasa na ako ng mga sinabi ninyo nung Enero lamang. Para so pala ngayon, nagkapalit na kayo ng isip.